Brandon Wakeling, welcome to the Process Podcast, my friend. How you doing?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm doing very well, thank you. It's really good to have you here. Been stalking your Instagram quite a lot recently and seeing all the great content you're putting out about weightlifting as a coach, but also your athlete journey. So on that note, would love for you to tell us a little bit about yourself, who you are, and what you do.
So to sum it up in somewhat of a quick little sentence, I'm Olympic weightlifter. I competed at the Olympic Games in Tokyo. I've competed at the Commonwealth Games on two occasions, one being on the Gold Coast in 2018, as well as Birmingham in 2022. I've also competed at the World Championship level on a couple of occasions. All up, I've competed for my country roughly 15 times or so. So I've done a fair bit of traveling around over my years. Didn't grow up competing in weightlifting. I actually played rugby league until I was 21, made the swap to weightlifting after that, and haven't looked back since. So since Tokyo, I've been a weightlifting coach. So I'm in a weird little transition period now where I've been kind of narrow-minded on being an athlete for however many years, 7 years at the elite level. Now I'm starting to deviate somewhat into giving back to the sport. So this is actually the first time I've come on a podcast where it's been about a little bit more than just being an athlete. So I'm looking forward to it.
Love it. Tell me about that transition from league to weightlifting. Can I ask, was weightlifting a part of your training regime as a rugby player? Did you know you were really good at it? Did someone nudge you to get into it? What happened there?
No, I actually had no idea what weightlifting was until I was 21. So I was massive into strength training since the age of 15 when I first joined the gym. It was partly due to wanting, because I'm only standing at a staggering 5'6". So for me to be able to keep up on the pitch in rugby league, I wanted to join a gym, put some size on, put some strength on, somewhat battling against insecurities of not being the biggest person either, going around at school. So it kind of gave me something to work for, but something to, build up my confidence. So the gym, just general resistance training, whether it was hypertrophy or strength, became a huge passion of mine from the age of 16 up until 21. I tried all the different modalities of training, powerlifting, bodybuilding, still didn't know what weightlifting was until one day at the gym, one of my friends there mentioned to come to this free weightlifting 101 session, which was at a weightlifting club about 15 minutes from where I lived. And I thought I would just break up the monotony of training, how just general strength training can be. And I went along. I didn't have the mobility to snatch straight away from all the years of playing rugby league and bench pressing way too much. But I think I cherished that it made me look beyond purely just going through the motions. And I'd built up quite a strength surplus through all the years of training alongside playing rugby league and athletics. So it played into my favor somewhat. And it just ended up having me going back for more and for more, roughly 6 months into just playing around with weightlifting twice a week at the club. I decided to stop my rugby league career, which was 15 years at that point, and just jumped straight into weightlifting for about a year, 5 sessions a week. I graduated from university and then I really jumped into weightlifting. So I gave up everything and trained weightlifting full time to try to qualify for that first Commonwealth Games in 2018. So that was my introduction to being an elite athlete as opposed to being more of a, I would say, casual athlete, despite still playing rugby league at a semi-professional level.
I mean, yeah, I think the first thing I was going to say is it's amazing that a rugby player can transition into weightlifting and be successful just because of the lack of mobility that most rugby players have. I mean, I certainly was one of them. I can remember I couldn't overhead squat a broomstick for the first 2 years. So that's impressive. But I guess context as to where you started when you first joined that weightlifting club. You obviously had experience. You've done a lot of weight training before. You built up good levels of muscle endurance, hypertrophy, absolute strength. You get into weightlifting. What are your best numbers at clean and jerk and snatch, Brandon?
Right now, my best snatch is 130, clean and jerk 175. So those are done at 73 kilos body weight.
So when you first stepped into the weightlifting gym, or you started just taking weightlifting a bit more seriously, kind of getting up to 5 times a week, what were your strength numbers at then?
My squat would have been roughly around 200. My back squat. My back squat was good. My front squat around 180. My my overhead squat would have been maybe 120, if probably not even that. I really struggled with the overhead mobility point. My best lifts at that moment where I gave everything up and jumped into weightlifting, my best snatch was 110, and my best clean and jerk was 130. So my strength was there within the squat. My pulling strength wasn't very good, and my Olympic numbers weren't the greatest, but I thought there was something there if I were to pursue it full time. Because there's not too many that pursue weightlifting full time, because it's not exactly a glamorous sport that we get paid any money for. So it was a risk that luckily paid off in the end.
And did you have coaches, did you have mentors who were telling you like, this is actually achievable? If you could hit X, Y, and Z, you might actually be in the shot to be competing in something like the Olympics.
The first person to mention it to me was my football coach. So before I had even decided to quit rugby leagues, this is only 5 months into it, I had a text from him saying to come into the club. He had a contract for me for the next year, which was going to be a bit more money. And he would like me to be a part of the team. And I, having done weightlifting for roughly 5 months at this point, said that I think I want to pursue this weightlifting thing and obviously not play football. And he said that it would be a great opportunity with the Commonwealth Games coming in 2 years' time. So at that point, my best snatch was 90 kilos and my best clean and jerk was 110. I was nowhere near a 200 squat at that time, but that was the first time that it had even popped in my mind, because that wasn't the reason why I started weightlifting. I just did it because I enjoyed it. And through the next year, my coach at the time did mention it, but it was more so just, I think I was wanting a call to adventure. I was at a bit of a crossroads finishing university. I didn't know what exactly I wanted to do. I didn't really want to jump into the workforce. I somewhat joined university to begin with because I felt immature and wanted to at least do something while I thought of something to do. So I thought this would be a good experience for me just to see what I was capable of and challenge myself. So it wasn't exactly for the Commonwealth Games to jump in. It was more of just a call to adventure that intuitively made me want to jump and take that leap.
So in your eyes, kind of like reliving or retelling that story, like you starting weightlifting and then, fast forwarding, you're competing at the Olympics and Commonwealth Games. How much of your success is down to like natural raw talent versus ambition versus like hard work?
Well, I've had times throughout my life where I would say I would have adopted those different kind of traits as my leading factors for success. So with weightlifting, Olympic weightlifting specific, I would say that was much more ambition than talent. Growing up, for instance, when I did my first 100-meter sprint in grade 1, I come first. So that was talent. My parents saw that, positively reinforced the behavior, enlisted me in rugby league, athletics from a very young age. And I went along with that, just going through the motions, just doing it for fun, social reasons, relying on talent, not really delving in too deep aside from long jump. I loved long jump more than anything. So much so that when the kids were getting, bikes and whatever else for Christmas, I asked to have a long jump pit dug out and installed in my backyard so I could practice.
That's awesome.
And in roughly grade 1 or grade 2, I still have the assignment at home where we had to write out what we wanted to be when we were older. And I said I wanted to go to the Olympic Games for long jump. So I was all in at that point of my life in long jump, very young age to be dedicated to something, but I loved it. And it gave me a lot more happiness when I did okay at long jump compared to when I did really good at rugby league or the 100-meter sprint. So that was somewhat of a difference where I relied on talent in one thing and ambition in the other. During my formative teenage years, I somewhat fell off that path, continued with rugby league, just due to my whole social group being within rugby league. I didn't really want to play at that point, but just continued along, relying on talent just to get me through. Playing okay, but not really spectacular because I didn't care all that much about it. And then when I found weightlifting, I found that somewhat revitalized that inner child that was pursuing long jump, and my ambition took over from there. And it's just night and day when you're being driven by talent and when you're actually ambitious about a goal. What's the Muhammad Ali quote? It says that the will needs to be stronger than the skill. With weightlifting, the will was surpassed the skill by 10x the amount, and it brought me a lot more fulfillment that way.
Yeah, I love it. I can resonate a lot with your story, except I feel like in my athletic pursuit as a rugby player, I never transitioned from that leaning on my talent into having ambition and the hard work to achieve more. And it's, when people ask you, what's the one thing you regret or you wish you did differently, and the cliche answer is like nothing, because I'm here today because of all the things I did. I actually always say I wish I took my opportunities more, and I actually wish, I coupled hard work and ambition with the talent that I had, and would love to see what I'd have achieved in sport. So it's really cool to hear that that's something you actually did.
Yeah. Yeah. Once I had coupled those together and the work ethic was there, once I'd achieved some accolades as I got further down my career, I didn't care about the result as much because all the work had been put in, and I could feel good that I didn't leave any stones unturned. And it was all just me coupling those together and putting all my eggs in that one basket and feeling pleased to know that I'd pursued something.
In putting all your eggs in that basket and making that transition to weightlifting, what was the hardest thing about the training process that you maybe didn't expect?
It was quite lonely overall. So talking through my specifically, we'll say 2017 was a very big training year for me. And how that essentially looked was I would train 11 times a week. So during the weekdays, I would train twice. I would get to the gym at roughly 9, 10 a.m., warm up, train. After that's done, I'll head to a recovery clinic that was across the road, head back to training straight from there, train till roughly 8 p.m. And that was my day essentially through all throughout the week. Saturday, I'll do one session in the morning, go home, get dressed, and I'll do a weekend midnight bottle-o shift. For those that don't know what a bottle-o is, it's a liquor store or alcohol store for those that aren't in Australia. And I lived at home with mum. I also had a second job where I was a pub janitor, where I would scrub toilet bowls 3 mornings a week at 4 a.m. And I didn't particularly have a social life at all at that point. It was, aside from the people that I knew within weightlifting, within this new circle, it was literally just weightlifting, eating, sleeping. For that training block went for about 18 months. So it was very lonely, and at times I would get very consumed with the event itself being the Commonwealth Games. And the more I put my effort into thinking about it, the more I put it up on a pedestal. And then the more that I would compare my daily and weekly actions in training to this mountain of a competition that I was painting in my mind, that I needed to live up to some crazy ideal that I had said that I had to reach at this event. So I thought I had to follow some linear progress, and I would beat myself up a lot during that year just because I was putting all of my attention on that event and qualifying for that event. Later, once qualifying for it, immediately shifting my focus to winning the event. So I didn't exactly soak up any of the accolades or the achievement of making the team. I was just shooting for some eventual failure, and I wasn't exactly focused on the process. So those two were by far the hardest parts of that journey.
I love that you threw in the word process at the end there, which is really like, what we're all about. It's like, creating that process and falling in love with the process, and knowing that the process will look after the outcome at the end. And it's also interesting you use that word consumed in that process. And it was just speaking to one of my coaches today about this whole idea of commitment versus being consumed. When we set these like big audacious goals, there's a big difference between committing yourself to that goal and doing the necessary things to achieve it versus letting that goal consume you. And we had a good conversation about it because what defines being consumed by something can be very different from one person to another. What we could look at from the outside, I think most people in the world will look at what elite athletes do and think that, wow, that their pursuit of being a great athlete is totally consuming their lives. But if you ask the athlete, they might have a very different answer, and they might feel balance, and they might feel, that it's not consuming them. So in you reflecting back on that year, and perhaps how your mindset around your weightlifting journey changed after that year, like how did it change, and did it change, and how did it change?
Massively. So at that event, at the Commonwealth Games, that I had been fantasizing about what was going to happen. I would envisage how the competition was going to go, how each of my attempts were going to look, feel, smell, everything. I have had like a vivid picture in my memory of how it was going to go.
And I'm guessing you're replaying this picture like over and over again, every day, every hour.
The drive to training, the drive back from training, in between sets, while I'm laying in bed, while I'm eating breakfast, while I'm stretching, for almost 2 years at this point. So once I finally got to the reality when I'd finished my snatches at the event, and I'd only gotten 1 out of 3 snatches, and I was much further away than what I thought I was going to be. Certainly didn't play out like that in my mind for those years leading up to it, but it did give me a good reality check. Firstly, so for the clean and jerks, I only got 1 after that, and I placed 7th. So I was well off a medal. I lifted much worse than I did in training. And the first thing that I noticed is that people that I actually cared about and valued didn't care what the result was to begin with. I could have, in their eyes, a lot of my family don't even know what weightlifting is. So when they were watching it, they had no idea. I could have won or come last, and they honestly wouldn't have known. Maybe if I cheered at the end, that may have given them somewhat of an inclination of that I had won. But yeah, they had no idea. So most of it was just me painting a picture of having to achieve some non-existent ideal in my head when it actually doesn't matter. It doesn't matter at all. Through that competition, then working towards the Olympics, I shifted and just tried to focus on the day-to-day. So obviously it's impossible to be within that all the time. There's times within training that are harder than others where I do get caught up in my head, but I would say I was a lot better during the lead up to Tokyo Olympics. And just as I thought, when I competed at the Olympics, looking back, I don't really care about the event at all. I don't care about the opening ceremony. I can hardly remember the competition at all. It's more so just a glorified symbol of hard work, dedication, and challenging yourself over the years prior. And that's what I look back upon. And I'm pleased that I had seen through to that event. But the event itself doesn't mean anything if you actually put the effort in prior. That's more just like a cherry on top.
What are some of the tools? What are some of the tools that you lean on in competition prep when you've got, because like you said, you had the Commonwealth Games where you place this expectation that you had really thought that came from others, but actually just came from you, right? You had that, you thought that you had to perform a certain way because that maybe validate X, Y, and Z. You then learn from that experience, and then you prep for Tokyo for the Olympics. You are focusing more on the daily process versus the outcome. The outcome's not that important. But like you said, the thoughts of the outcomes still creep in. What do you do? Like, what are your tools now? How do you bring focus back to the present? Or, is there a healthy amount of actually thinking about the outcome and what you want to achieve that can actually be beneficial, not detrimental?
If we're talking just simple motivation from the day to day, luckily enough, somewhat unlucky enough, I had to compete 8 times to make the Olympic Games. So I didn't get all that much time to think about the Olympics because I was traveling all over the world competing, having to peak ever so often. So I was very much scrambling throughout the whole process.
Mm.
And I tried to keep just focusing on the day to day. I track all of my training. So for people, there are people that just fixate on the future competition, and they don't even track their training. So they don't really have a way to win in their mind to get that dopamine hit and positive reinforcement in their training. So I would track all of my progress, try to beat what I was doing day to day, week to week. That was enough to sustain me in terms of motivation to go back into the gym and try to beat my squat 5RM or something else along the lines. I tracked everything. One thing that helped but also didn't help at the same time was I suffered a lot of injuries throughout that process. So throughout my time competing for the Commonwealth Games, I didn't really have any injuries that put me out for good. I was always doing something, but leading up to Tokyo, there were a lot of unfortunate injuries that did put me out of action, or significantly did. And what they all did was, by each injury would somewhat strip away the identity that I thought I'd created for myself when I went to the Commonwealth Games, because I was this athlete now. Beforehand, I was just this person that trained. And now I found something to cling onto, which was some elite weightlifter. So each time I would get injured, I would have to think outside the box to what happens if this all ends tomorrow, and put more effort outside of just being a weightlifter. And this eventually led me to doing things like starting my own podcast and coaching, and trying to not be so consumed by being an athlete, which is such a small slither of the pie when it comes to your life. That gave me a lot of perspective, but also made the journey a lot harder to make the Olympics. So it was a mixture between tracking all of my training, trying not to look too far ahead, simply because I couldn't, because I had a comp to go to, and also slowly chipping away at my athlete identity through being pulled away from it.
There's so much gold in there. I love the idea of there's this whole idea of, we have like lots of rooms in our house, and we need to give love to all of our rooms. And if we go all in on one room, when that room disappears, like, what are you left with? Which sounds like the epiphany that you kind of had, which is, injury was serving as a good reminder that you might not be a weightlifter tomorrow. And if you'd label yourself and your whole identity was around being a weightlifter, and if that's taken away, then what are you now? That's something that I actually still battle with. It's like, how do I introduce myself on a podcast? How do I introduce myself, in a busy room? Like, am I a coach, or am I the podcast, or actually, like, is that just a profession, and who I am on the deeper level is actually something very, very different? How do you answer that question now when people ask you, what do you do?
I've been thinking about this a lot, actually, because I'm the same way as you. I've typically just gone for, my name's Brandon Weightlifter. Like, I'm sure I probably did at the start of this podcast. And I've thought whether I speak on whether that's traits, being that, I'm Brandon, I'm curious, I like to do this and that. I just so happen to enjoy training. One thing I don't like calling myself is an Olympian, because in my head, that is some super out of this world alien type special character that I idolized for my whole childhood. Whenever I seen an Olympian, I thought they were the special among us. And once I got there and realized, obviously me being there, that I'm human alongside everyone else, I despised even the idea of saying that I'm an Olympian. I'm some special individual when I'm just like everyone else. I didn't grow up, training for weightlifting from the age of 4. I grew up just like everyone else doing different sports. I just so happen to fall into doing something that I loved. I committed to it, and then I made some special event. And I would say I'm someone that likes to train. I like to service others through the vessel of weightlifting. I think that's how I see myself these days. Weightlifting is a tool that I can use to help empower, build confidence, essentially give happiness to people that I work with.
I love it. I'm on that. I'm on that same journey at the moment, and wrestling with that question. which is like, who am I? And I was just thinking about it today after my workout as I was just walking outside and asking myself, I want to redesign the way that I answer that question. And I know if I start saying it, I'll start believing it as well. So thank you for sharing kind of where you're at on your journey. I'll take some inspiration from it.
I'm not quite there yet as well, but I'm definitely pondering on that on a daily basis. That's for sure.
Love it. Brandon, let's talk about what you're doing right now. You had an injury. You're really kind of going into the coaching world a bit more. Tell us a little bit about what your coaching practice looks like.
So I started coaching online in 2021 while in hotel quarantine after I competed at the Olympics. It was always something that I wanted to do. That just so happened to be the right time to do it. And I've been working online just one-to-one with people alongside one-to-many. So I have a team program and an individualized program. And that's been really good for my own training to be able to give back and actually share stories, unique experiences, and obvious technical knowledge and programming and everything that I've learned from my coaches, because not everyone gets to travel the world and work with the best when it comes to weightlifting. So for me to be able to find an avenue to give back in that sense has been, really fulfilling. Much more than I would have thought it would have been.
And the people that you're working with, Brandon, are they kind of like everyday Joes who just love weightlifting? Are you working with high-level athletes as well?
It's a bit of a mix. I don't particularly care who I work with. I'm not searching for the next Olympic champion. I work with surgeons, athletes, people from all around the world, plenty that do CrossFit. Obviously, CrossFit and weightlifting go hand in hand. So I've worked with plenty of CrossFitters, people that just have joined a gym and want to learn a new skill. Sorry, my daughter's walking past the door outside there.
No, good.
Obviously doesn't want to go to bed at the moment. But yeah, I don't discriminate who I work with. I don't particularly. Can you still hear that?
Yeah. No, I can't hear it. I mean, it was a nice whistle, the first one.
Oh, okay. Okay, that's fine. Yeah, I don't particularly mind who I work with. I'm not here searching for the next Olympic champion. I just want to help people build confidence, get better at the Olympic lifts. Someone could come to me, they could be 55 years old, overweight, have a sore knee, and they come to me and say that they've lost all their motivation to train. They're quite bored of the training process, and they think through learning Olympic weightlifting, through me helping them, could get them on the right track to then building motivation to train again. If someone comes in through the likes of Olympic weightlifting and it gets them in the gym, gets them motivated through weightlifting, and it works, then for me, that's just as powerful as if I coach someone to the next Olympic Games. So I'm not in it for glory. I'm in it to help people that want to use the Olympic lifts to better their own lives.
I love it. Okay, so a question for you. When it comes to identifying talent, and this doesn't necessarily mean, trying to find the next Olympian, but basically seeing if someone has potential to, really like take on weightlifting and see some great progress. What are the fundamental things that you're looking for?
People that don't seek short-term gratification. You have to have a long-winded approach. As much as weightlifting is a power-dominated sport, it is a marathon, not a sprint. So it takes time. And if you're someone that can't go through a 12-week program without getting agitated and wanting to jump ship, it's going to be hard for you to make progress in the long run. Alongside that, if you don't have a passion to train, then you're somewhat wasting your time jumping into weightlifting, because once it gets tough and things get hard, then it's just going to be easy for you to quit at that point. If you have both of those things, if you have a longer time horizon in the way that you expect results and you love training, then that to me is a recipe for progress.
I love that I think many people would have answered that question by going straight to like the physical attributes that someone would need to excel in weightlifting. And I love that you didn't go down that route and you went to like the mental approach.
I mean, I can talk about, having a long torso, short legs, long arms, but there's always exceptions to the rule. where there isn't an exception to the rule for those first 2 points that I brought up.
Yeah, 100%. Love it. You talked about working with some great coaches and, some of the best people in the world. Who are some of the biggest, mentors and coaches that you've worked with that have had an influence on the way that you're now coaching?
The first one would be the coach that I mentioned earlier in rugby league. So he coached me on and off from 14 to 21. And he was a coach that was very selfless and saw potential in everyone. And he went above and beyond for everyone. And he was instrumental to my progression as an athlete and even outside of the sport. So when I was 18, or I may have even been 17, I was playing in an age capped rugby league team, and he was coaching the A grade side at that point. Grown men getting paid to play football, and he called me up and asked me to jump in and play an A grade game because he saw potential in me that I certainly didn't see. I thought that was going to be my demise of that game, but it turns out instead of sinking, I swam. Go forward to a couple of years later when I made the Commonwealth Games. He contacted me again for an employment contract to work with a health organization as an ambassador. And there was a lot of public speaking involved, and I was petrified. I thought I was going to bomb at my first speaking event, but he thought I would swim again, and I did. And I've had a good career so far doing that. So he just had the ability to see potential in people that either didn't even recognize it yet or didn't believe it themselves. So I see potential in everyone that I work with through those experiences. The second coach would be, so my coach, Miles, people may know in the CrossFit space, he's also Tia's weightlifting coach. So aside from obviously all the technical knowledge and all the weightlifting knowledge that he's bestowed upon me because we've worked so closely together for the last 6 years or so, he just showed to me what passion for something looks like. So he worked a full-time job, but also for a long period of his career coaching, he's still coaching now, but he would be at the gym 7 days a week, twice a day, while still working a full-time job. I would get emails from him at 2 a.m. some mornings with ideas for programs and program changes. And what he likes most is when he's in competition and he can do his best when it comes to doing all the coaching stuff on the day to help people achieve their goals. And when those athletes hit their targets at the competition, he finds himself in tears on multiple occasions at these just little in-house comps. This isn't the Olympics. I'm talking about just at the local weightlifting club. And it just showed me how powerful it is to be working with people and helping people achieve their goals. And he's coached at many Olympic Games. And he just loves weightlifting and helping people get the result that they deserve on the platform. So with those two, they've been very influential and kind of covered a lot of bases in terms of not just technical knowledge, because he's got 30 years of technical knowledge. He's pretty much told me every trick under the sun, but also looking beyond that as well.
Love it. When we talk about weightlifting coaching, maybe the less educated world will see like these different camps around the world. And you see on like social media, you've got like the Chinese weightlifting, you've got Russian style weightlifting, you've got the American weightlifting. Haven't really heard too much about Australian weightlifting, not gonna lie. But what are your thoughts on all these different camps? Are you seeing, for someone who's so deeply invested in it, are there consistent differences between the approaches, or is that something that's been kind of like popularized by social media and how people want to talk about it and maybe even use it as like an excuse or crutch when results don't come their way? What are your thoughts?
You touched on a few things there. The last one, certainly I agree with. There are differences in the way that you can program. Not all work. You can't exactly program someone Bulgarian style training. It's not the best for you. They obviously want natural at the time, and you can't max out 5 times a day every day. Russians are a bit more linear, working around the 80 to 85% range, really trying to dial in their technique. Chinese is a bit of a mix of both. All of it somewhat stemmed from the Soviet style of training. I know that Australian weightlifting did stem from the Soviet model. there's just key fundamentals that I work with. I don't do anything fancy. I think people love to look deeper than what they need to.
Mm.
People will focus on some small intricacy in weightlifting, like the barbell velocity that they give a snatch. But if they can't keep the snatch close, then what's the point of focusing on step 67 if you can't get number 3 right, kind of thing. So I like to teach the small batch of fundamentals of the movement. And then once someone can keep the bar close, have control during the pull, have a nice stable catch position, have some speed and extension, then they can somewhat deviate and then find those little idiosyncrasies that every lifter has, because we don't all lift the same. Body proportions are different. There's definitely different styles, but it's somewhat geared towards the individual and what works best for them. So I start out super basic, drum in those fundamentals, and then they can stem off somewhat into what works best for them.
I love that. That actually leads me perfectly into my next question, which is online coaching as a weightlifting coach. Like, weightlifting can be so intricate. There's so many, small nuances. As you said, like maybe at the beginner level, it's just kind of grand ideas and concepts that we're trying to create. But as someone progresses, like those nuances could be so small that can have such a big impact on a lift. How do you talk us through like how you have become an effective coach working with people online in weightlifting?
I don't find it too difficult. I obviously, as I said, I drum in the fundamentals of it. There aren't too many people that need to focus on those small little intricacies of the movement. And for those people that do, you can communicate virtually in that sense. I know that some people don't like the idea of online coaching and think that you need to be in person. But if you're in a club where there's 40 weightlifters and one coach, then it's not exactly going to be a one-to-one personal training experience. Where when I work with someone online and they send me lifts every single day and I can give feedback every single day on all their exercises and say what they should be working on, I feel they can get a lot more out of that. And as I said, I don't like to reinvent the wheel or throw anything in that's just going to distract the athlete or not move them forward to where they need to be. I'm fairly basic in my approach, although I do like to spice it up somewhat if the athlete does enjoy a specific exercise. So if they're like a specific complex that on paper isn't the optimal thing to do, instead of programming like a robot, something that they won't even want to do, I'll let them do the exercise that they enjoy doing, because they'll put more effort into it, they'll enjoy it, and probably get more out of it than if they followed a soulless cold program, if you get what I mean.
Yeah. Yeah, I love it. Yeah, you're taking a client-centric approach, and basing it around the individual and what they want, what they like, versus being so principle driven.
Yes. Yeah. Although, yeah, when it comes to programming, I don't like to tell the athlete to follow the program to a T 100%. I
Yes.
do like to have I would rather than rely on their own principles in how to conduct sensible training as opposed to following a program to a T, because I can't control all the variables that someone has outside of weightlifting. Maybe they had a long day of work and they come in and feel rubbish, but it says they have to hit 90%. It's just not going to happen that day. And if there's someone that is fixated, and there are a lot of people that are fixated on hitting what's programmed, it's quite common to be that way, then it's not going to be a good day. So I try to teach people to be a bit more intuitive with their training. When things feel good, you can go heavy or heavier. When things don't feel good, bring back the weight, don't miss too much, and just stay consistent.
Yeah, I love it. I mean, I resonate with all of those protocols. As someone who's working with a lot of people online as well, giving people firstly the power to self-regulate and to say that that's okay, because you're right, there is a lot of guilt and shame associated with changing a program for a lot of people. They've invested money and time into it. Like, you're a great coach with a lot of accolades. They want to do you proud, and the way they think they're going to do that is by following exactly what's written. But I think you're exactly right. Giving people the power and the tools to know how to regulate themselves is such a key part of longevity and success.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I try to work week to week when I do my programming. So I don't like to plan too far ahead. I may have somewhat of a vague idea but I like to assess and see how the athlete's going by the end of the week, and then according to how they're going, how they're feeling, or how their lifts are looking, they may have some new issue that's popped up. They're working on a new cue. It can be like whack-a-mole sometimes. You work on something that you think that you've got fixed pops back up again. So it's unfortunately always like that in weightlifting. You don't even get to the Olympic Games world record level without there being issues in that degree. So you have to somewhat stay on the ball when it comes to that.
Yeah, I love it. I would love to talk about like the intermediate weightlifter. So not the brand new beginner. So someone who's been doing weightlifting for a while, they've got, you know, all the basics down. Maybe their numbers are actually quite decent. Kind of thinking about a lot of people probably who exist in the CrossFit space who've been doing it for quite a long time. What do you see as the biggest, or you can have a few here, but fundamental mistakes that they make, the intermediate weightlifter makes, that we need to focus more on?
I would say it somewhat probably depends on the goal of the athlete. If the athlete wants to go to the next level, then it takes somewhat more of a commitment. And it's not exactly doing more, but doing less of the things that don't exactly move the needle forward. So when I had my best training, it wasn't me adding more stuff and doing more. It was removing distractions. And when I did that, the quality of my training would go up. So it's essentially just upping the stakes in the level of dedication. It's somewhat time orientated within that segment of being an intermediate, and you just need to somewhat step up that process a bit, not get too caught up with the day-to-day doing more. Essentially, you just need the minimal effective dose. Anything more than that, you start getting too tricky with your training or doing a bit too much. I know in CrossFit that seems to be relevant. People like to just do more and more and more.
Yeah.
But the people at the very top are very dialed in, and they have things planned out to a T. They're not exactly doing more for the sake of doing more. They're doing whatever they're doing more of, it's for a purpose. So everything has to be purposeful. Your training has to have intent. If you're doing pulls, you're not doing super heavy pulls as fast as you can. You're doing everything for the snatch and clean and jerk. So I would say niche down into more weightlifting if that's your goal. Don't add in extra sessions and feel like you need to add in cold plunges and breath work, or I'm just thinking of random stuff here, but just adding more in the bowl.
Yeah. Okay. So talking about going all in with weightlifting and making that more of the focus, how much, maybe in your experience as an athlete, but also in the way that you coach people who are more singly focused on weightlifting, how much of a role does like GPP style training play? Like, you know, let's say like bodybuilding style exercises that don't necessarily have direct carryover to the clean jerk and snatch, like aerobic training, mixed modal conditioning work. Like, how much did that actually play a part of your weightlifting career?
Well, GPP is a little different in Olympic weightlifting because we're in the gym all the time. So it's kind of like we are GPP as a sport. It does get periodized. So obviously we have training blocks. Well, the start of our training blocks a lot higher volume. If you don't have a comp coming up and you want to have a period where you're doing higher volume stuff for the sake of injury prevention and hypertrophy, whether or not you want to gain some muscle, that is something common, but it is athlete dependent. If I was doing a 12-week block, my first few weeks, I may be doing some sets of 7 for the squats, pulls, 5s towards the end of that. And I'll also throw in some other, you know, bodybuilding stuff, whether that's some dumbbell press, pull-ups, dips, RDLs, a lot of glute work, plenty of ab work. So there is a bit of a mix in there. When you were speaking of all the countries' philosophies, China, for instance, has a big emphasis on bodybuilding. So they will do plenty of bodybuilding after every single session. Even at the World Championships training hall, they'll be doing some form of row or press or some form of posterior chain work post-session. So it does play a part. Not for everyone. I would say it is important for the sake of sustainability in your career to do some form, though.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, I think probably the way that most would look at it is that the further away you are from competition, maybe there's more of a place for that kind of work that's not necessarily specific And the closer you get to competition, the more you got to be doing of the actual variations of the lifts and things specific to lifts.
And it can just get, a bit stale for the athlete.
Yeah.
If they're just doing the same thing over and over again. Some people like a bit more variance. Some people don't. I am in the boat of doing. I just love the snatch and clean jerks. I could do that all day, every day, if that's what it came to. But for the sake of injury prevention, I do a lot of posterior chain work. Coming from a rugby league background, I do a lot of like lower traps, rhomboids, anything to help like open up my shoulders a bit more because they used to be so internally rotated. Lower back and hip issues from rugby league, so I do a lot of glute work and ab stuff. So it does have to be in there.
Love it. Brandon, you talked a little bit about like who you love working with and what you're doing with your coaching practice, but what is like your ultimate goals? Do you have like some, big guiding North Star that you're aiming towards or something you want to accomplish, in the future?
I'm still in somewhat of a hazy phase where I'm thinking that through. So at the moment, I work with obviously one-to-one clients from wherever and whenever. I work with a one-to-many, so I have a group program. Ideally, I want to stay online because I do want to scale and make impact at scale. I could go down the route where I open a gym and work with a small space of athletes, but I think I would rather, through using the internet, have a bit more of a broad impact. I think in the fitness industry, there's a lot of bad actors, or there's a lot of fake, fake ways of the process or the look and feel that's being portrayed. So I want to be a breath of fresh air in some regard and actually tell it like it is, as someone that, didn't grow up in a weightlifting camp from the age of 3. I'm not serving a lifetime drug suspension like a lot of people that are in the weightlifting space that do coach. I'm just a regular person that loved to train and made the Olympics. So I just want to help as many people as I can.
I love that. Okay, Brandon, we have some quick fire questions for you. Now, the rule of the quick fire questions, obviously, it has to be quick. You cannot use the answer "it depends" in any of these. So you're gonna have to take one side or the other.
Okay,
Okay, you ready?
shoot.
Question number 1: dynamic or static start?
Dynamic,
The snatch or clean and jerk?
clean and jerk,
Internal or external rotation overhead? That's a real it depends.
internal,
Do you teach the clean and snatch from the bottom up or the top down?
top down,
Defend or drop the press out rule?
defend,
Cuddle, marry, or kill? Snatch, clean, jerk.
kill the snatch, cuddle the jerk, marry the clean.
Love it. Slide or stomp your feet?
I wish I could say slide, but I stomp all the time. I can't help it.
Tell us what the Wakeling complex is.
The Wakeling complex is push press plus power jerk plus split jerk.
Love it. Brandon, that was pretty quick fire. Way better than I do every time I master quick fire set of questions. Our very last question, Brandon. Describe your perfect day.
My perfect day is wake up, have breakfast with the family. Maybe we go out to the beach or something afterwards, or a park. We come home, have a swim, get a coffee, do some weightlifting programming, catch up with some clients, end the day having dinner with the family after myself and my partner have both trained, end the night watching some Frozen with my girlfriend and my daughter on the couch, and then we go to bed afterwards.
I feel like in the confidence that you answered that, that's not too dissimilar from what your current day looks like.
Weekends. Not all the time, unfortunately.
Love it.
I
Brandon,
wish.
this has been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for sharing all your knowledge, your experience, and your wisdom on weightlifting. Where can people find out more about you?
You can look me up on Instagram if you're at Brandon Wakeling. I should pop up. I should be the only Brandon Wakeling with a Olympian little profile pic. I'm on TikTok as well. You can find my podcast, the Waiting Game podcast. And if you want any coaching, if you go through my link in bio, I have a team if you want to train just like I train. Or if you're someone in the space that wants some personalized stuff, you can just go through my socials that way as well.
Love it, Brandon. It's been an absolute pleasure. Keep on doing the good work, and looking forward. Oh, and also hopefully good luck on your road to recovery with your knee. And I'm looking forward to watching more great coaching content and maybe even see you back on the competition floor.
I appreciate it. All part of the process.